What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel, and today we are going to cover the ins and outs of Madden 21. We're going to discuss everything that Madden 21 has to offer, and we're going to give it a grade. We're going to determine whether Madden 21 is worth your money, and you guys might be surprised at the decision that I come to at the end of things here. Now, we're going to grade this year's Madden on 10 categories. We're going to grade it based off the soundtrack, the gameplay presentation, overall presentation, variety, ratings, franchise mode, face of the franchise mode, the yard, mutt, and then we'll give it an overall grade. So, based off of these 10 categories, we're going to get into the good, the bad, and the ugly about this game, and we're going to discuss the finer points of whether this game is worth your money or not. So let's jump into it with the first and the most simple of all of these categories, and that is the soundtrack. The soundtrack for this year's game has a list of a few decent songs, but it only has 18 songs. This is a complaint of mine for many years. I know that it's a struggle for them to get the licenses for all of the music that you would want to have in a game, but I hate whenever a game only has 18 songs, because after a month these songs are overplayed and it gets pretty boring to hear the thing. So being that they are some pretty good songs, you can jam out to them for a while, but eventually you're going to end up turning them off because you don't want to listen to them anymore. I give the soundtrack a B- on this game. The songs are good, but you need more songs in order to keep it fresh. With that being said, we're going to go and move into one of the strongest points of this game, and that is the gameplay. So I have various different notes to go through in terms of the gameplay here on Madden 21, and we're going to talk about, first and foremost, probably the biggest addition to Madden 21, and that is the defensive line skill stick that's been added into the game. What I have to say about the defensive line skill stick is that it is absolutely amazing. It is a fantastic addition to the game. I don't know who thought of this addition. I don't know why they didn't think of it sooner, but it absolutely changes the game and makes the game feel so much better. It makes it so much easier to get off blocks on the defensive line. It makes it more realistic to pass rush on the edge, and it makes the game overall feel more immersive. It makes the game feel more realistic. It takes the user away from the linebacker or the defensive backs and makes the game more realistic, more immersive, because of the fact that you can't cover the entire field with one player anymore, and most of the time you're going to be focusing on using the defensive line in order to get to the quarterback or be disruptive in the backfield. That is one of the most important additions that they made to this game, and it is a fantastic addition. In addition to that, they've added more defensive line animations so that the interior defensive linemen can actually get off blocks and actually help in multiple different ways, even if they're not a top-tier defensive lineman. That was a problem for multiple years for me in prior years, and has been for a lot of people, is that your interior defensive linemen, they might get off a block, but they might not actually be able to help you out in the run game, because offensive players are so much more speedy than defensive linemen. So the difference in speed caused issues where those defensive linemen couldn't really help you. This year, with the added animations that they've added to the defensive line and the added way that they actually interact with the offensive line, has made it much more realistic in terms of how the defensive line actually interacts with the game and how they actually influence things. So that's another positive note. On top of that, they finally added the diving tackle animation back, and it actually works. I don't understand why they removed it from the game last year to begin with. There was a diving tackle animation, but it didn't work the way that it should. It wasn't realistic, and this year there's an actual legitimate diving tackle animation, which is how a lot of players in the NFL end up making tackles, because a lot of defensive backs don't really know how to tackle or properly tackle, or they don't have the size to tackle, so they have to go after guys' legs. So that's a big realism point. I don't know why it wasn't in the past game, but it is much more realistic in this game, and it works, and I like it. I really appreciate that addition. Slower, especially defensive players. They're going to run around slower. They're going to change directions slower because of the fact that they added in those new ratings for change of directions and things like that. So it's a really great addition that they made the game feel slower. The game feels much more immersive. The game feels much more realistic. And again, we're getting away from the days where people can take one player and cover 80% of the field with that one single player, because of the fact that the players feel more realistic. If you're going to take a linebacker, they're going to feel much slower than a defensive back. Even if you take one of the faster linebackers in the game, they're not going to feel agile like a defensive back, and you're not going to be able to cover the same amount of field that you would have been able to in the past, and that is a fantastic addition to the game, a fantastic change. A couple of other things to note is that there are still some bad contextual animations. For some reason, let's say that you throw a pass high to the left of a receiver that's running from right to left. They get hit in the backfield, or they get hit as they're going to catch the ball. What ends up happening is an animation where they get hit to the right and the ball gets flung 5 feet in a different direction, and the animation just doesn't make sense based on the way that the play happened. Those things are still in the game, so that's a detractor for me. In addition to that, I think that they've added some half-decent passing arcs to this game. I feel like it's possible to, at least a little bit, compared to prior years, drop the ball in over the heads of some of the defenders if you hit the right passing animation. If you use some of the touch passes and the lob passes and whatnot, you're actually going to be able to get the ball over a defender's head, and it's not just going to be a duck pass. So they have improved that slightly, I would say. On top of that, I would say that the offense in general plays very much the same while the defense doesn't. The QB, if you try to roll out with the quarterback and you decide to take a tackle, you're going to fumble 9 times out of 10. They still haven't fixed that the quarterback literally fumbles any time that they're touched, so that's a problem for me. The defenders tend to play a little bit dumber than they have in past years. I will say that there are a lot of improved tackling animations, a lot more realistic looking tackle animations, and that's a good add to the game. And the last couple points that I have on the gameplay here is that wide receivers do tend to get stuck on defenders a lot, probably because of the fact that everybody plays slower. So that's a bit of a difference, that wide receivers will tend to get stuck on defenders. I've noticed quite a bit more than they have in past years, which is a little unrealistic. And then they still, for whatever reason, haven't gotten rid of the bad rack catch animations. When you're throwing a slant to a wide receiver and you just expect to lead him, and the ball's thrown in front of him, and for whatever reason that receiver just decides to turn around, or they stop mid-running even when you press rack catch. They haven't gotten rid of that. I don't know why, but just a couple minor negative notes, but a lot of positive notes to the gameplay this year. The gameplay feels a lot different. It feels a lot more fresh to me, and it feels like a new game. Kind of was surprised when I started playing this game and I saw all these new features come together for a pretty good end product. So with that being said, the overall gameplay grade for me gets an A. It's a really good gameplay experience, at least from the beginning. Now these things might change over time, especially if some of the big boys on YouTube, like they normally do, go out and complain about the fact that they can't use the middle linebacker and cover 90% of the field, because that happens. I guarantee you some of these things are going to change, and probably for the worse, but right now the gameplay gets an A. With that being said, let's talk about the gameplay presentation. They've added a lot of nice things to the gameplay presentation, so if you guys haven't dropped into at least an exhibition game mode yet, I recommend that you do so. I've been playing through a lot of franchise, a lot of face of the franchise, some of the yard. They've added quite a few things in that are really nice improvements, really nice immersive improvements to the game that make it feel more like a real simulation football game. So they've added team-specific crowd chants. I think one of the most amazing things to me was when I dropped into a game with the Pittsburgh Steelers and I got a first down, and then the PA announcer said, "And that's going to be a Pittsburgh Steelers," and then the crowd got behind them and chanted, "First down." And then they started, "Here we go, Steelers, here we go." I thought that was freaking amazing. I don't know why that hasn't been in the game in the past, but that is a welcome improvement. That is fantastic that they've added team-specific chants. They've added, better crowd chants in general. They've added a much better stadium PA announcer that's actually kind of interactive. And so those are big gameplay presentation improvements. A couple other minor things. When a player gets injured, they've changed the animations for that. So a player gets injured, they take a knee or they lay down. They don't just do the stupid things that they used to do where they hold their elbow if they have an ankle injury or something like that. I can't guarantee that it is 100% fixed, but it looks like those presentation elements have been fixed a little bit, which is a nice improvement. In addition to that, I would say that there are a couple negatives to the gameplay presentation. I'm not a fan, and we'll talk about this in the next category, which is the overall presentation. I'm not a fan of the new look of the game with all of this neon stuff and dare I say, Fortnite-looking stuff. I kind of call this game a Madden in Fortnite's body. It's really weird. Like, this is like the Fortnite version of a football game is what I call it, based on the presentation. I don't know why they went with all of these neon colors, and I guess they're trying to modernize it. They're trying to go for the younger crowd. Whatever. It doesn't bother me too much. When I first saw it, it bothered me a lot, but it doesn't bother me too much because it doesn't affect the gameplay presentation too much. It's mainly a menu thing. But there is quite a bit of neon on the screen around the scoreboard, around the bottom line ticker, and all these different things that kind of detract from the gameplay a little bit. And then in addition to this might just be a personal preference thing, but whenever a player gets tackled, it's way too loud this year in the game. It makes it feel very arcadey. I don't mind that in the yard because the yard is supposed to be like NFL Street. It's supposed to be big hits and loud impacts and stuff like that. That's fine in that game mode, but in a regular game, you don't hear hits the same way that they sound in this game, so they need to tone those down a little bit. And then in addition to that, like catching the football, it's like someone's like slapping their hands or catching their hand. It doesn't sound the same that it does when you're watching a real life NFL game. It's way too loud when a player catches the ball. So those are a couple of points there, but overall I give the gameplay presentation an A because of those improvements that they added. They are fantastic improvements to the game, like the team specific chance. I can't tell you how much that means to me. I don't know if that means as much to you guys, but it makes it so much more of an immersive experience. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and get on to the overall presentation. The overall presentation, as I said, this stuff looks like Fortnite to me. I don't know why they decided to go with this theme. I just think it's odd. Even these screens that pop up in between like this, very bright, very neon, very in your face, not, simulation football, realism football type of feel to it. I don't know why they decided to go in this direction, but that's their choice. This screen as well. The neon purple to match, I guess the Ravens. It's not even their colors, but not a big fan of that personally. These are the same exact menus as last year. If we go into a franchise mode, start up another franchise mode. I played through 2 seasons of a franchise mode for you guys to get a feel for franchise mode, but let's start up a new one. The menus end up being exactly the same. Let's say I click use real life roster. This screen, exactly the same as last year. If I go forward a couple steps, every menu is exactly the same as last year. That's a negative for me because I didn't like the way the menus were laid out last year. I haven't liked the way the menus have been laid out for multiple years, but with that being said, it is what it is. They tried to go for a new modern look by just taking the existing menus and brightening up the colors. In addition to that, the appearance of the game feels like Madden 20 in a new skin. Like I said, menus are exactly the same, but the look is slightly different. So in terms of the overall presentation, I'm going to give this a C-. I mean, the presentation's not bad. It's not horrible to look at, but like I said, it's not nice to look at. It doesn't feel immersive. It doesn't feel like I'm getting on here to play a real football game until I actually get in it. It feels like I'm getting on here to play Fortnite, and then I click in and I get into a real football game. It's a little odd to me, a little jarring. In terms of the next category, we're going to talk about the variety of the game. They added in the yard this year, which is a very welcome improvement. We'll get into this more later, but one of the things that I really wanted to talk about is the fact that I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised by the yard. I really thought it was going to be a Mutt Squads 2.0. I really thought it was a marketing tactic by EA to try and get people to buy the game. Oh, we're adding the yard game mode into the game, when in reality, it was just a Mutt Squads 2.0. They just pulled Mutt Squads out of Ultimate Team and made it into its own game mode, but that's not the case. In my personal opinion, in my limited experience with the yard so far, and seeing other people play it online, It's a nice addition to the game, and it really kind of does feel like NFL Street from back in the day. It's not perfect. There are some flaws to it, and we'll get into those later on. The customization isn't as great as you would want it to be, but they're probably going to improve on that as the season goes along. But the game is the game mode is a welcome improvement. So from a variety perspective, they added a nice new game mode that's going to keep you playing for a while. They made improvements on other game modes like Face of the Franchise. They didn't make too many improvements on franchise mode, but they say they're going to be coming with more improvements. Ultimate Team's pretty much the same. They still have Superstar KO added in from last year. So what I have to say is, from a variety perspective, they get an A, because there are so many decent game modes here that it's going to keep you playing for a while. Even if you're not in love with franchise mode and the fact that they haven't improved franchise mode, there are other things for you here to play. Like, I personally think Face of the Franchise is going to carry Madden this year, at least for the beginning, because it has such a good storyline. And like I said, we'll get into that a bit more in the future here in the next couple points. But with that being said, variety-wise, the game gets an A. The next category is going to be the ratings. The ratings in this game are going to get a D. I mean, it's pretty simple. Everybody knows that the ratings for Madden this year are horrible, even worse than last year. I don't want to take any shots at anybody specific, but it's almost like the guys that rate these players don't have any clue what football is, or even watch football whatsoever. I mean, we go into the roster, for example, and not even the ratings are bad, but the positions for the players are bad. The Pittsburgh Steelers starting right tackle is Matt Filer. We go to left guard. Oh wow, there's Matt Filer. They signed Steven Wisniewski in the offseason to play left guard for them. I wonder why Matt Filer's at left guard. It makes no sense. Well, let's go and look at who's at right tackle. Maybe there's somebody there that's better than him. Oh wait, there's a 59 overall Zach Banner at right tackle, who doesn't play right tackle for them. He basically plays tight end for them. I just don't understand what they're doing here with the ratings. The ratings are pretty bad. We all know it. We've all seen it. If we go ahead and look at the Patriots, for example, the Defensive Player of the Year in Stephon Gilmore is a 99 overall. That's well and good. That's fine. You want to make him a 99 overall? That's fine. But make it consistent. Why is the runner-up Defensive Player of the Year in TJ Watt an 86 overall? And there are many more on many other teams where these ratings are wrong. This guy's 13 points lower than the Defensive Player of the Year, and this guy barely got beat out for that award. So would he have been a 99 if he won the award? I don't really know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me how they came up with these ratings, but that's just one major flaw, one major example that I noted, in addition to the players being out of position. So from a roster perspective and a ratings perspective, they get a D. Franchise-wise, they didn't really add anything to the game. One of the things that I will do while we're talking about some of these points in the background is I'll load up a new franchise and show you, because there is a couple of notes to look at specifically in franchise mode. So let's go ahead and create a new franchise. We'll just use the live roster, and basically we'll just start talking about the fact that there are minimal changes to franchise mode. And I apologize for this loud announcer in the background. We'll start up a franchise mode. There's been minimal changes to it. A couple things that I've noticed just going through it to begin with is the awards and the Pro Bowl are still broken. So some of the things from last year that should be patched, that are very, I would think, easy things to patch, like the punt returners and the kick returners are never going to be the players that actually lead in punt return or kick return yardage, or punt return and kick return touchdowns. I've gone through 2 seasons, and in both seasons the stats didn't line up with the players that won the award or got elected to the Pro Bowl. Same thing with defensive backs. The defensive back that wins Defensive Back of the Year doesn't really seem to be the player that had the most interceptions or had the biggest impact. So some of the awards and stuff are still broken. In addition to that, we've noticed that the teams still have the wrong contracts on a lot of these players, and a lot of these teams still have too much cap space, which has lasting impacts on your franchise. franchises. It means that certain teams can bid on players that they shouldn't be able to get, and it creates problems for you. In addition to that, I would say that the presentation is actually slightly improved. So whenever you go to your pop-ups, like these X Factor messages, it takes you to a separate screen now, as opposed to being overlaid behind the screen that was behind it, that one with the coach where he's standing in front of a window. So you can now clearly see everything that these messages say. It says game day goal, and it clearly shows everything here. This is an improvement for me because you can see these things. Before, when it was overlaid over top of that bright window back there and it was white font, you had a very hard time sometimes of reading what your goal actually was for that week. And for player breakout challenges and stuff like that, that would be a complication that would be a problem for you. That's a good improvement. Another thing, contract negotiations still seem to be pretty dumb this year. I don't know when the update to this system is going to happen, but you can go in here and offer a contract exactly what they're asking for. He wants $53.3 million over 3 years. I'm going to give him $53.6 million, and he's going to decline the contract. Oh, he actually accepted it this time. When I came in here the first time, he declined it. So for whatever reason, there are still situations where you can give a contract to a player that is exactly what they're asking for, and for whatever reason they decline the contract. Or you could give a player way less than they're asking for and they'll accept the contract. So the contract situation, the negotiation system, still broken. I mean, those are just a couple of the broader points that I've noted. Most of the other stuff in franchise mode is the same, but I want to say there is one massive improvement to franchise mode that I think a lot of people might overlook, but it means a hell of a lot to me because it increases the immersiveness of a long-term franchise. And that is when you go to your scouted players and your auto-generated rookies and you look at their faces. They have actual legitimate faces this year. Now, they don't look exactly like real people. They've taken basically all of the same faces from the previous Maddens and made them 3D looking. That is a big improvement to me. That is a really, really nice improvement because these look like real players. And so the difference between players that you draft, let's say I drafted Benjamin Bowden, the difference between him and a player that's actually on my team with an actual portrait isn't going to be as big. Before, you really could tell the difference between real-life players and auto-generated players, or rookies from a draft class. And it kind of took some of the immersion out of the game because once you got 4, 5, 6 years into a franchise, you had a lot of these generated players in there, and they don't look like real players. But now they look a little bit more realistic. These look a little bit more like actual players, and I think that adds to the immersion of franchise mode, and I think that this is actually a really nice improvement to the game. Hopefully you guys agree with me. I think that that's a big one. But overall, franchise mode nonetheless gets a D+ because of the fact that they've done nothing to improve the game mode. Franchise mode, don't get me wrong, it's a decent game mode, but I have to give it a lot of negative points because they just haven't touched it. They just haven't done anything except for what I just showed you with the scouting players, with the auto-generated players. That's the only improvement that I've seen. We're going to go ahead and talk about Face of the Franchise now and talk about some of the improvements that they've added to Face of the Franchise. Like I said earlier, I think Face of the Franchise is really going to carry the game this year, at least at the start. So just to run down some of these things really quickly, I said that the Rise to Fame thing is really welcome this year. It's a welcome improvement. They've added a nice amount of choices and depth to Face of the Franchise mode, being able to start in high school. It's really nice to be able to start back in high school. You can choose what type of high school you went to, whether it's like a prep school, a legitimate high school. You can type in your high school name. You can choose between a couple different mascots. It makes it a little bit more immersive. On top of that, the storyline is a little bit more relatable. It's a little bit more interesting. You also have now the ability to simulate parts of the game that you aren't involved with. So you're going to be playing as an offensive player, and if you don't want to play defense, you can actually simulate defense now in Face of the Franchise mode, which to me is really important because I don't care about playing defense if I'm a quarterback or a wide receiver or a halfback in Face of the Franchise mode, because I'll be able to outscore the other team. Because this leads me into my next point, is that the skill mode for Face of the Franchise mode is maybe a little too easy because I've been beating teams in Face of the Franchise mode by like 50, 60, 70 points, which does take away from the immersion of the game mode a little bit, but I mean, it's still fun regardless with the storyline and everything and being able to, take yourself to the NFL. They should add the option to Face of the Franchise mode for the storyline part of it where you can play on a higher difficulty, because it's a little bit too easy to just ride through there and score a bunch of points and make your player get drafted to a team that you want them to get drafted to. They should make there be a bit of a reward for playing on All Madden or something like that. Say you play on All Madden, maybe you come out with a higher rating if you still perform well or something like that. So that would be a nice improvement that's not in there. Kind of stinks that you have to play on, I think it's All Pro or it's Pro. I'm not really sure. Another thing is, during the franchise mode, you don't have to stay at one position, or during the storyline, you can switch to a halfback or a wide receiver, and if you choose to, you can switch back to a quarterback, so you have some flexibility there. You're not stuck into one position. So again, adds the element of control, and that leads into my next point, where there is just a total level of control to Face of the Franchise mode this year that hasn't been there in the past. In the past, you were locked into the Devin Wade, Colt Cruz storyline, and you just had to play through that storyline. Whereas now, with this Face of the Franchise, there's much more user control to it, which is very, very nice to see. And then in addition to that, I think I already hit on the point that there's improved depth in terms of making it to the pros and the things that come with actually making it to the NFL. Once you made it to the NFL in past years, it was just kind of a career mode at that point, a regular Madden career mode, whereas this year there's now a whole new screen. If I pop into Face of the Franchise mode for you guys, there's a whole new way to play it here, where it's just your player. You don't have to focus on the whole franchise mode. It doesn't look like a whole franchise mode, and you can play it more as a franchise, as a Face of the Franchise, and there are more things to interact with from the Face of the Franchise mode. So that's a really nice thing to see. So Face of the Franchise overall, for me, gets an A. We'll move on to the Yard next, and there are just a few points to add there because I've had minimal amount of time to actually play it, but a handful of hours to be able to play it. So with the Yard, I think that it's a fun addition that kind of takes us back to NFL Street, which I touched on before. I like the customization ability in the game, but I find it a little bit difficult to actually edit your player's face. That's one of the things that I think is a little bit in need of improvement, so hopefully they expand on those options in the future. The game... whenever you play a game, for whatever reason, let's say, each team gets 3 drives or whatever it is. Let's say after my 3 drives, I have 30 points, and after the other team's first 2 drives, they have 1 point. The game doesn't just end there, because the max points you can get on a drive is 10. That team that has 1 point has no chance of even catching up to the team that has 30. So one of the things that I think that they need to add to the game is, if you're in a situation like that where there's an insurmountable lead, the game just recognizes that and ends. For whatever reason, that losing team has to play out that final drive. I don't really know why, but I think that's something that they should add to the game. Customization, like I said, is pretty good. You have quite a few options to choose from. You can customize your home versus your away uniform. You can customize everything from your cleats to your sleeves to your, whether your jersey's tucked in or, rolled up like I have mine on my home uniform. You can select so many different things, and I hope that they just keep adding more customization. I hope they keep adding more options to wear as the season goes on, and I think that will be a good addition. So the Yard for me gets a B+, because like I said, it's not a perfect game mode. It doesn't feel the greatest in the world, but it's a good step in the right direction if you're trying to make an NFL Street type of game mode. One of the things that worries me about the Yard is that they're going to try to take the Yard and make it into an NFL Street game or something similar, just its own standalone game, and they're going to try and charge you $60 for it. So that kind of worries me. I think it should be kept in Madden as an extra option, because that kind of helps make Madden actually worth the money that you're paying for it. But with that being said, moving on to the final category, which is MUT. Not much to say about MUT other than the fact that it's pretty much the same as last year. It's the same every year. Nothing really changed here. Too much of the time, I think, from the developers is spent on MUT, in my personal opinion, when there are other areas of need like franchise that don't get much attention at all. What I will say is that they've clearly diverted attention to the gameplay as a whole. They've clearly diverted quite a bit of attention to the face of the franchise mode and the yard mode, so I can't knock Ultimate Team too much for taking away too much time from the developers, but in past years, they spend all their time on Ultimate Team and don't make too many improvements elsewhere. So with that being said, I think that Ultimate Team just for me gets a D because it's not fun. It's a way just for EA to kind of get money out of their consumer, but not going to say too much more on that aspect. But that leads me to the overall grade for this game and whether it's actually worth your money or not. So, as an overall grade, averaging out everything that I've given you so far with those 10 categories, Madden gets a B. Madden 21 gets an 83 overall grade, in my opinion, which makes it worth a buy. I think it's worth the money. I mean, it's not the greatest sports game out there. Obviously, there are areas of improvement that are needed, but I think that this game gives a genuine improvement from previous years. Like I said, it's lacking in some very important areas such as franchise, but they made legitimate improvements in the gameplay, in face of the franchise, and the addition of the yard. This game's going to keep you playing for longer because of the volume of good/decent game modes that are there between the yard, face of the franchise, Ultimate Team if you play it, Superstar KO, and the franchise may feel a little bit refreshed this year, even though a lot of people have complained, and we do want fixes to it. We want legitimate additions to it to make it feel more like a legitimate franchise mode. What I'll say is it might feel a bit refreshed because of the additions that I said that they did make to it, the commitment to future patches, and the improvements in gameplay will hopefully make franchise mode as a whole feel a little bit more refreshed, a little bit more immersive, and hopefully in future years they continue to build upon what they've done this year, because I think that this year's Madden has taken a good step in the right direction. So yes, surprisingly enough, after everything that we've said prior to this game's release, I think Madden 21 is worth your money. I think you guys should go out and buy it and give it a try. You don't have to pre-order the expensive editions. Just go out and buy the base edition and give the game a shot, because I think that it's actually pretty fun with the additions that they've made. And hopefully you guys find some value in this review. If you guys do, make sure you leave a like on the video, comment down below with anything you guys would like to see next, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good day.